glass of water.
I would love a glass of water. How long have you been at Nicholas?
I've been there 2 years, coming up to 2 years. I do A&R for the publishing company. So yeah, all sorts of stuff, pop projects, rap, electronic. I'm quite diverse as a label, especially the publishing company.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm very familiar.
Oh, okay. Where is it that you work? I could get all this information by reading your
Yeah.
background.
That's okay. So I'm head of music publishing,
Okay, cool.
but also
Nice.
and I was
Do you just know Esther, who I work with?
yes, she was at Infinity.
She's around. She's doing things now, but she's
Yeah. I think that
Ouais.
So, hi. C'est bon, ça marche? Hello everyone. My name is Antoine. I'm the president of Tracks magazine, and we're going to start with a little introduction by each of you, if you can
Okay.
start.
I'm Thomas Lefrançois, CEO of Allo Floride. It's a booking agency, but we're also doing some management, label, and publishing. And we own some venue and festival. I'm running the company since 7 years now.
I'm Rachel Graham. I have been working in publishing since 2011, in music since 2004, initially in the UK for 15 years, and in France for the last 5. And head of music publishing for Infine, which is a French-based record label currently.
Hi, I'm Max Le Dizez from AMS Booking. We are a booking agency management and also a publisher since a few months now.
Hi, my name's Louis. I work for Because Edition as an A&R. Because is, we like to say, the biggest independent publisher in France. And I work a bit internationally with the UK as well, but based in Paris.
Okay, thank you everyone. So the goal of this panel is to start to highlight the particularities of the French market. We've been through the first panel with the French institution, who play a big role in how culture evolves in France. We saw then the club and festival scene, and now we're the labels and booking agency. We can talk a bit more about the music itself. Maybe we saw those past especially past 5 years, more and more music coming out of France, and even across Europe, this music is now exporting. We think we haven't seen that since the French touch movement, which was something very particular that everybody tried to replicate afterwards. So in your opinion, and we can start with you this time, where are we now? Is there a surge in the creation of French electronic music artists that you can observe now?
Yeah, I think, I was actually at Deckmantel here a few months ago, and I remember one of the real takeaway sets was a guy called Simo Cell, who's from Nantes, associated with a label called Brothers from Different Mothers, I think.
That's some of the best we have.
And no, I was really impressed. I don't think that Paris, compared to Berlin, is particularly known internationally for its techno scene. But I think there are some young talents that are changing that. I think that record company is a good example. I'm a big fan of a guy called Antigone, obviously, who's kind of important in the Parisian techno scene. Yeah, I think kind of warehouse and kind of raving culture probably didn't come as early on in Paris as maybe London and Berlin. But I think that Paris has kind of caught up quite quickly, and it's now very much a lively scene.
Max, if we can have your opinion.
Yeah, I agree with what Louis said. I think we are exciting moment in France right now, but it's also an addition of factors that we have this explosion of artists, of label, of collective Now we have like collective who sold out like 1,000 to 2,000 venue, just DJs, you know. So it's really an exciting moment about electronic music. But I think it's also because a lot of venues have opened the door, whatever you are amateur or you are professionals, they don't care, you know, it's like this alternative venue. And so it gives the opportunity to all these artists to play in front of an audience and become professional, in fact, in a few years, you know. So right now we have this really like this strong scene. I think we just missed some international track, like big success, because I believe that a scene can be strong with tracks. It always goes with the music. And if you have a track who goes worldwide from a young French artist from the techno scene, I think that's going to be the way to open the window for all the other guys.
Rachel?
Yeah, I think that at the moment there's like a wave that is being ridden of but all of the young kids who have been informed by the French touch scene, who have gone to see all of these kind of DJs and the bottleneck and the funnel that was like the DJ as God, and now everyone can be a little god in their own room with Ableton or whatever. I think with the advances in technology, with all of the influences of French touch, like there's a huge wave of confidence for a new generation to do stuff. But you know, these collectives are just being formed and well, in the last like 5 years, and growing, and there hasn't been a sort of like a Lucky Me in the UK where you have a Hudson Mohawk who breaks the whole scene. There hasn't been. I mean, there's like Petit Biscuit and these kind of guys, but they're not really from a solid collective or a solid scene. So as that's forming, I guess that will pave the way for more exposure.
Yeah, I think it's a mix of all that, like new venues, new collective, the way of you approaching the music production, like it's way easier than before. The streaming and the new application like SoundCloud helps a lot also, and finally, I think also we have more and more artist entrepreneurs, like they're more informed about how it's everything is organized. I see more and more kids who know a lot of things about music industry that I didn't see that 10 years ago, and I think now that's why also we have a growing scene in Paris and in France.
And some of those elements would be the same for everybody in Europe, like having a new ways of communication and a market that is opening a bit. But would you find some particularities to the French artists and the way they can access that market?
I think internet helps a lot also French artists to look abroad, and think internationally, because before there was not so much information, and also there was not existing any scene in Paris, for example, like there was only few clubs like Rex or Pulp. Now you have 50s techno parties every weekend, and so it's all that, like it's a scene, it's the scene developing the ideas and the envy from the young artists.
And do you think is there a French sound today? Maybe I'm going to turn to Max, because I think he has one of the French sounds that exists today, which is a mixture of that ravey techno scene you mentioned, but also the hip-hop scene, who's very strong in France. France is the second market for hip-hop in the world. And traditionally, and especially when French touch was around, it was very different. Those were two separated music, and French touch sounded more like a music that foreign, non-French people want to hear about France, but not what's really in France. And what artists you have, like Bama Oyende, Fatal Walima, or Van Bicrav, represent maybe a sound that French hasn't found its sound for a long time.
Yeah, I think it's really a paradox you say in English, yeah? Because in France, there are no place for underground electronic music in the streaming. Like it's really like tiny market, but the hip hop take all the place. But in terms of concert venues and like so shows, is all about electronic music. So it's really weird that we have this gap, which is like a really big gap, you know, in terms of exposure, in terms of tickets sold when you have to go out to see an artist, you know. So that's really interesting. And what I saw when with the artists we work with is really that is two really great big things. Is also, yes, it's a little bit like the streets come back in electronic music. Is a little bit the French touch inverse, you know. French touch, it was like people from good neighborhood who go to underground club and rave to play for bad boys, and now it's a little bit the inverse. It's people from the suburb and stuff who come from more the hip hop scene who do now electronic music in the posh club of Paris, which is really funny to observe, you know, this because I think that's we missed in the French scene, because we talked about that last time, but in UK, for example, or in US, you have no problem of representation of different people from different origin in the electronic music. In France, a part of DJ Mehdi, I don't think we can quote a lot of artists, you know. So it's really a big problem, I think, because the hip hop, as you said, is so big here. So why we don't have this representation from people from suburb or people from different origin in the electronic music? You know,
yeah.
It's really weird.
Well, I mean, I think that, like, because I worked in London for a long time as well, and I think that London also has this this scene of privilege, because who has the time to just take a year and write an album with their friends in London, where you have huge rents to pay and studios to book and all of this stuff, and it's, yeah, like, you know, these phenomenon like the vaccines and in the US, like the Strokes, they're from ultra privileged families, you know, and they have the time and the money to do it. And, you know, you have the French touch scene, all the guys from Versailles, you know, they were not worried about if they were going to be paying their rents and stuff. So I think now it is interesting that there's a shift, but I think it's also because of this egalitarian move of technology. You don't have to book a studio for 250 euros minimum a day to make some music, you know?
Yeah, but I don't really agree, because the biggest DJ in UK is Carl Cox, you know, he's 25 years old, you know. You have Goldie, in US you have Juan Atkins,
Sure,
you have Derek
but
May,
we're talking about the accessibility and the growth of a new scene, not the installed people, because the installed people haven't changed for 20 years. You know, you have the same DJs playing headline sets at Coachella who have played headline sets at 1 million clubs in Europe for the last 20 years. It hasn't changed. So for me, I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about the smaller emerging scene, because I don't think in France that there's scenes that are emerging, but there's no, it's just people getting great opportunities to play, but it's not, there's no wave coming through like French touch was like a wave from an outside perspective.
I think Max is actually developing a really exciting young batch of artists who produce and play a style of electronic music called Gabba. And I think Gabba is worth mentioning because it's very fast, it's kind of hostile to some, but there's a kind of new wave of Gabba artists coming out of Paris that I think represent a distinctively French sound. And it's not, they end up making it kind of quite friendly, because they'll chop up bits of like recognizable hip hop tracks or Britney Spears, or, you know, they'll kind of bridge the gap between kind of straight Gabba and pop. And that is one of the interesting subcultures that I've seen develop in electronic music since I moved to Paris about 2 years ago. So to get back to your question, that would be one answer.
We have to say you now are working together with Because and Natsat.
Yeah, as of about a week, I think.
Yeah. Like that. But Because was also one of the big actors of the second French touch vibe with the Justice, at Banger, and everybody. So,
yeah, you know, I think it's important to the identity of Because to kind of represent what's going on in Paris and what the kids are listening to and what the kids are doing. And I think that was part of Ed Banger's mission, to kind of represent, you know, the musical culture of the youth in the city. And I think that's something we still care about. And the business we're doing with Max is in that same philosophy. You know, it's about reflecting what's going on in the clubs and in the streets of Paris.
And that's what we love about music, is that it reflects the environment. So maybe French said something about an elitist France at the time, and it's changing now. Do you observe that in the music you defend, in your artist?
Yeah, it's changing now, but I think like France realized with Justice Daft Punk that we can go abroad. It's pretty recent. We talk about Carl Cox and American DJ or UK DJs. They 25 years ago, they already know that they can tour worldwide. It's pretty new for French artists. And we now have festivals who play electronic music. We just have to remember we are a rock country, like booking agencies. Electronic booking agencies doesn't really exist when I start like 15 years ago. You have independent, but not huge one. And also France was not looking abroad because we are more focused on being a production company. We produce live shows, and we were not international booking agency. It's something pretty new for maybe 5 or 10 years now. We are really like people like Max or what we do with Hello Florida, but before it was a big historic called production company who do mainly rock music, live bands. So I think that's changing right now. And also a fact is like artists now are their own entrepreneurs. They create their company and they start to have their own economy. So that's changing now.
Yeah, I think also it's the first time that because of the internet and because of all of the information that can be shared, that French artists are actually going abroad and doing interesting things and using that to leverage getting more opportunities in France, because sometimes it's really difficult to get into the French club circuit or whatever, and so artists have gone outside, done something cool in London, done something cool in New York, or done something cool in LA, and then when all of that starts to flood through social media, people in France say, why these guys live on our doorstep, how come we haven't given them any opportunities? And going abroad has been a good way to leverage like internal success also.
But that's one thing, is like until 10 or 15 years ago, if you were French, to go abroad, you had to go to London and make everybody forget you were French and try to speak without an accent and sing without accents and try to make it that way. It changed with electronic music, but if you were making rock, you couldn't be French.
I don't think so, because I think in the last 5 years, like for example, La Femme, they have created a huge wave of pop music that's French, that's exportable, and that's sung in French. And so you have La Femme, you have Vendredi sur Mer, you have all of these artists that are being playlisted internationally, and nobody cares they're speaking in French.
Yeah, but I think it's connected to the booking agency, because now booking agencies are looking abroad, and they are connected to other booking agencies, and the market is starting to open to French act. You saw La Femme, L'Impératrice, this Christine and the Queen, this kind of act playing Coachella, touring US. It was not true 5 or 10 years before, because nobody knows or nobody hear about this act. And
Ish. Yeah, I tour managed La Femme in 2014 in the US,
recent.
and they had no booking agent in the US at that time.
Because that's one of the things, is very hard for French artists to find any booking agent, because in France there are not a lot of booking companies, and especially for the new artists, the one who are starting, they start having a booking, like friends doing their booking, but from that to a big booking agency, there isn't any majorly.
Yeah, but I think it's also to understand that the booking agency system in France works totally different than everywhere else in the world. In France, you have like a real partner who accompanies you to construct your live show, that's going to help you to find a concert hall that you can do rehearsals, that you can test lights, and they're going to really invest in you. And then in exchange for that investment, they're the producer of your show, and so then they sell your show. Whereas in the UK, your booker is just, they put a price tag on it, you get it, you do a balance sheet for every show. So I think that the discrepancy of like how to work internationally has been very poorly translated to French artists, because they have higher expectations of booking agents abroad. And so then when they find that actually they're just given a fee and they have to sort themselves out for everything, it's a little scary.
Yeah, it's connected to how everything works in France, because you have to pay every person on tour in France a minimum wage, like 200 per person around. And so that's why I say like we were more focused on being production companies than international booking agency, because we need to develop and pay for everything, rehearsal, wage, and French artists were used to that. So when they want to go abroad, they were asking for everything paid, because it was the case in France. So that's true that didn't help the artists to understand how it was working abroad. Moreover, like you need to have a license to tour, and you need to have a license to sell artists in France, and the license only production company has before. Now more and more artists has, and now it will change, because there is a big change this year. Now you just have to fill a simple application to have your license. So for the next year, artists will be their own production company. I would just add the fact that you have to imagine that in France you have a budget tour. Maybe you can add the merch in the budget tour, but you don't have any royalties, any publishing revenue that will help you to tour, because the production company makes only money with the touring. And so when you go abroad, you have to break only on the touring revenue. And in the rest of the world, you have one company. You have your royalties, your publishing revenue, your merch revenue, your tour revenue, all on the same company. So the economy is not the same.
Yeah, and I think also what Rachel said is really typical to the French market, is the booking agency got, like, for me, too much power. I mean, like, it's because also the management side in France compared to UK or US, where you have really strong management company like 360 or Red Light. And I think it's really weird that in France, the booking agent is say to the manager what to do. You know, it's really like, it's the first country I always saw that. So I think it's also because we are not really like really structured for the, not structure, I don't know how you say, but organized. You know, we need to organize more the business also with the management side, because I work with a lot of young artists, some like one of the artists we signed 2 years ago was thinking that like release a EP was to put on SoundCloud, you know, like he was really serious about that. Was thinking that it was
a real
like,
release.
yeah. So you know, we need to have also more managers to like build the business, and you know it's going to be more strong to work with a booking agency, because right now your booker is also like quite the manager at the beginning, because when you book this guy there with this famous artist, it helps you grow as well, you know. So in France we have put a lot of power in the hands of the booking, also because they are production,
because they invest.
It's true in UK they just like, it's like a commercial. They book. They don't even take your plane ticket.
They give you the bottom line. But also, that's another aspect of the French market that I was really surprised by at the beginning, is because you have this structure of intermittence, and which is basically that the state, you give the state half of the income that you make on these dates that you have to be paid, and then in exchange, once you reach a certain number, like 35, 42, something dates in a year, then the state starts to pay you a regular income. So as you are an employee, it's very difficult then for your structure and your statute as an employee of the state to then be an employer of a manager. So it's a very complicated structure. So that's why management hasn't really evolved so well in France, because how can an employee all of a sudden be an employer, and also why a lot of our artists are constructing a new formulation of their own company, and in their company they have someone who is their manager, who is implicated financially, and that's how they treat their percentages. So it's very particular to the French market because of this intermittence. That how can you be an employee and an employer at the same time?
I do think it reflects something quite cool, which is that the government is very involved in kind of supporting culture and music specifically in France. And I worked in the US for a while, and I didn't feel the same support. I think the subsidies that are available to us as a record company to market albums, or the existence of something called the Bureau Export, which is a branch of the Ministry of Culture, I believe that basically helps French artists and French labels broadcast and promote their music abroad. These things are really cool, and I don't think they exist in all that many countries. And having worked in music elsewhere, I noticed it pretty quickly in France. It's nice to have the support of the government.
Yeah, that's one of the themes we talked about in the French panel with the French institution, is the exception culturelle, the cultural exception, that since World War II kind of divides the cultural matter to the economical matter. So the question is, how you still do business, because it's hard to just talk about money in France, especially when it gets to the arts. So to develop an artist and to find partners, you need to be able to have those clear conversations, and that's maybe with international partners, the difference of
yeah, when I sign an artist on management and booking, I always think about how we're going to break internationally. For me, the market is really a small market. But I cannot sign an artist and saying to him, yeah, you're going to tour like in Dijon, in Bordeaux, it's cool. Yeah, it's cool, but that's not how I think you can make money. You have to think globally, and that's what is cool with electronic music, because it's kind of the only big music, French music you can export, and also because we are always, since day one, the leader of the new tendance, it's always kind of come from France every 20 years. So it's really important, to, I think globally. So of course you need to have promoters, sometimes booking agency, publisher, and also do some. What we do first is we do an EP on a cool underground label in Berlin or in London. It makes you grow in this city because the DJ is gonna play you. It's also really important to we work a lot with the PR company for DJs, because in UK, for example, all the big clubs got a resident DJ, and if this resident play your track every week, I think club is the best promotion you can have for a track, because if you dance on a track, you like it, now you do your smartphone, everybody's gonna remember it. It's the best commercial you can have on the dance track, So it's really important to work with all this network and push the good buttons, and that make you grow internationally.
And do you, and all of you, I'm going to ask the question, do you work with those French institutions closely, the public institutions?
Yes, sometimes, yes. Sometimes.
How do they help? In the label or in the booking?
How do they help? Yeah, you can do a subsidies for a video. You can go to see, for example, Sacem. They help you to do a video clip.
Yeah.
You can, but you are not sure to have it. It's like a commission, so you can fill the file. But I never build a budget to say we're gonna. It's sure for me. It's bonus. It's bonus if you have it.
Yeah. The Sacem, because we work in publishing, the Sacem, they can help you for the creation of the music. So with getting international writers to do co-writes, or with sending your artist internationally to do some things, or doing stuff in France. There's different applications that you can make for subsidies for that. And then, like on the label side, it's not my expertise, but there are similar initiatives.
SPPF. SPPF, you have CNV also. We do a lot on our business, because we do a lot of live acts. So it's less the case for DJs, because the help is based on what the producer invests, and the amount of wage. So on a live act, you are 7, 8 on the road. So the investment is big. So you need the fund. When you're going abroad, you can have help from Bureau Export, you can have help from CNV. But even when you tour in France, you can have help for doing like first support. Like you have a lot of help in France. That's true. But it's also because production company pay for everything, rehearsal and wage, and it helps maintain the fact that artists are paying every time when they play, and that's important, and that's why it exists.
I think there's kind of a flip side, though, to France kind of being a bit of a welfare state culturally and generally, which is that because I think a lot of the artists I work with know they have a certain, safety net, and they'll be able to, worst comes to worst, have decent unemployment benefits and all that sort of thing. I do sometimes think that they don't always have the same hunger as some of the artists I've met in other places who are really, in a bad situation if they don't get their career together. And I feel like, ironically, kind of the existence of the safety net sometimes makes them not quite as hungry or ambitious as they should be. Now, obviously, I'm not making a generality. It's just something that I've observed, a couple of times in specific situations.
And I think it can also give longevity to certain structures that would probably have died before, but because
Give names.
Later, but because they have access to all this public funding from the government directly, it curbs a little bit of the entrepreneurial spirit, we can say.
And how does it work in the other direction for international artists who would like to go and make it on the French market? Is it as complex? Is more complex from other countries, and how?
I don't know. I think it really depends on the artist and the sound. I used to manage an artist who is German-born, well, Chilean-born, but lived in Germany most of his life, called Mathias Aguayo. And France was a bigger market for him than Germany. He played more often in France than Germany. He sold more records in France than Germany. And in his 20+ year career, France has always been a huge market, more than the UK and more than his home country. So I think it really depends on the artist. It depends on how you treat the market. I know that there's, a circuit of clubs that if you really make the effort to go and probably lose money on certain dates for a while, eventually you will start to accrue fans in that market, and then you can go, like playing clubs like iBoat and in these smaller ones outside of Paris, can really help give a lot more confidence to the general French public about foreign artists. Not just going to Paris, because it is France, it's not Paris, it's France.
But it's true that we have a big local scene, but a lot of international acts are playing, but a lot cannot play because they are too expensive, or we didn't have enough money to tour them in France. Both reasons it's the same, but it's because also French we don't work with brands like they did in the rest of the world. We don't have so much money with brands because before festival was as funds from the government, as funds from a lot of institutions, and maybe way more than today. And so they didn't develop the work that the festival worldwide did with the brands. So we just started 5 or 10 years ago working with brands, but we have also a law called Y20. We cannot have money and do advertising on alcohol, and cigarettes. So that doesn't help the festival. So sometimes it's difficult for French festival, even the biggest one, to have a big international artist. But it starts to change because the French market is bigger and bigger, and we have huge festivals, so it starts to change, and brands start to understand that they can invest money in another way. So yeah, that's why also I think maybe French artists were not looking abroad because the market was so huge before that they can do a big economy only in one market, because we have so many festivals. You can tour every 30 kilometers in France.
my perspective, I mean a publishing perspective, is try and kind of bring English or American writers to kind of work on French albums. I think doing that correctly is about identifying what it is that, you know, France maybe is missing or isn't quite as good at. And I do think the kind of chanson française, variété française tradition is very specific, but I think it's led to a situation where French producers don't have the same kind of sensitivity towards a big pop radio banger. You know, it's variété française is more based around lyrics and the meaning behind those lyrics and things like that. And so something that I've tried to do is call upon some English or American producers who do have that kind of sensitivity to a real kind of radio kind of pop banger sound and have them work with French bands and French vocalists and French top liners, because I do think they bring something to the equation that, you know, I'm not saying there are no French people who can produce pop bangers, but I don't think there are as many per capita.
Yeah, it's not.
In a newer definition of a pop banger, I would have to say, because there has been a lot of old French pop that has had global influence. But yeah, we're talking like in this case in the last 20 years. I saw there was someone who was agreeing with me. But anyway.
And so, what are the big trends that you can observe right now in that in those changes and the way we're more connected with different partners from abroad?
I don't know. I don't think it's always a great thing. You know, you look at some of these DJ Snake songs and they just feel like experiments that were thought up in label offices, and you sometimes see kind of a series of artists on a song. You know, some will be Latino, some will be English, some will be American. And I do think it's important to not kind of overemphasize the interconnectedness of the world and start having these kind of mash-up tracks with a million different influences and traditions. I don't know, I think DJ Snake's an example, but there are many others. But then, you know, I also think there are very helpful and interesting collaborations. I put together a French reggaeton song last year with one of the French rappers I work with who decided to rap in Spanish. I think these are interesting experiments, you know, to try and, you know, connect different markets and build bridges. But like I said, I don't think we should be going too far, too quickly in that direction either.
But what we hear in the French top 50 charts and have been for the past few years is a lot of reggaeton or reggaetonish vibes on French lyrics, and also a lot of what we used to call Eurodance, but is actually made by rappers in Marseille or in Paris.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you have the rap is pop now. Like the Spanish song in a French rap have replaced the "Fuck the Police" track in the French album. You know, it was it's like an obligation. But to go back a little bit more on electronic music, I think what is really important, the connection between worldwide, is really the labels, the underground labels, because for me it's kind of our media right now. Yeah, you know, you have this really label. When you just release a track on this label, you're gonna tour in the country like directly or even worldwide. You know, labels like Monon Black or Pan or, you know, Osgoodton. You know, you sign on this label, you're gonna tour in Germany, UK directly. You know, just one track. So it's like they are the media for this kind of music, this genre. You know, they are like the top of this thing. So it's really important to see how the underground label are so important, like a brand. You know, basically more important than few years ago where we didn't really know what was the label, you know, the DJs play. So now it's really, the label is really like the quality, you know, people trust the label and say, yeah, whatever's released on this label, it's gonna be cool and stuff, and promoters look at it, and the DJs look at it. So it's really interesting to see how underground label is important right now in the career of electronic music art.
Is the part of those underground labels and music in general bigger in France as a market than it is in other countries, where if we take the UK or Germany, you can, from the underground to the top selling artists, you can see a progression and everything exists. In France, there are the people who want to kind of stay in the underground. It's not the best world, but it's something not aiming for the pop, not aiming for commercial success, you know? And that's a big division that exists in France. So how do you maybe play on that and try to navigate for your artist from this underground? Can this underground be enough to make a living, or do you?
I mean, I think that it depends on the ambition of the artist, but there's not many artists that are making music that say, hey, I'm just going to make some music, but I'm super happy to go work in a bank every day and like have a very normal path of life. Like most people who are creative and are making music, they eventually want to only do that. So yeah, there has to be an ambition there to have some level of commercial success. And I think that it's just with the interworkings and the structure of industry. For example, you have Warp Records. It's very underground music by definition, but it's a very popular label. They've had very good commercial success, and it's not because their artists are ultra commercial. It's because they have managed to elevate this underground sound to an audience that is widespan. So I just think in France that just hasn't happened yet. There are the mini majors, like Because, who are very involved in certain different types of genre of music, but electronic music-wise, like we don't have a Warp Records. Even you can't say Headbanger even is that, because it's too targeted. It's so yeah. I think there's a gap there, and to go from commercial success to, I mean, even if you're looking at these established underground electronic labels, and then you need to go a step up. Like, where do you go? In the UK, you've got Warp, or you've got Mute, you've got a lot of really experimental but popular labels, and in France that doesn't exist.
Ninja Tune, XL, labels like that.
I mean, Ninja Tune, yes. XL is part of Beggar's Group, so you can't really, XL, Young Turks, all these things. When you're releasing an Adele record, you can't really say that it's like underground.
Thank you. That's all the time we have. Before we take any questions, if they are in the room, I can finish by asking all of you one industry tip that you would take. So how to work with the French labels. If you have one final thing to say, and then we'll go ask if there's any question in the room. We start.
How to work with French labels, booking agency or management? Start to find one who speaks English.
That's a difficult part, isn't it, in France?
Well, it's less and less, but that was the point before. And no, just I think it's less difficult than before. To be honest, don't be afraid. We are artists changing mind in France now. They want to travel the world, and management company. We need more management company in France. It starts to happen. Everything is changing right now, so I'm confident in the future. Positive.
How to? I think like with working in any market, just find a partner that's in alignment with the aspiration of your project. I mean, if you just say, oh, I want a French label to have a French label. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. So if you've got electronic music that has some orchestral parts, and you want to come and be a part of Infine, totally works. If you want to bring that music and try and get signed to Headbanger, see you later. So it's find a good partner. Like do your research and find a partner that corresponds with the type of music that you make. And pursue it that way. You can't just pick one out of the hat and say, yeah, Because is got a super good reputation, so I want to be on Because. Maybe it doesn't work.
Yeah, if you want to work with French market, I think, it's exactly that. I think you said everything. You need to find a good partner and look out a little bit, be curious about exactly how it works, because each city have his own sound, like in Toulouse they prefer this like banger track, and in Bordeaux it's more deep electronic and musical. So it's interesting maybe to check in the clubs or in the like who's playing a lot in this venue, and to try to study a little bit more the market, because we have we are not a big country, but we have a lot of differences, like the kitchen, you know, in each area we have our own kitchen, you know. Is the same for music and for music taste.
Yeah, we also have food.
A bit like Max said, you know, if you're looking to work in the French market, know your stuff, do your research on French music and the kind of regional differences and what people listen to here and there, because if you're able to show that you've done your homework on the French market, you know, immediately the French person you're speaking to will be, will recognize that and will appreciate them.
Any question? Yeah.
And I can totally relate to that lack of hunger that is also in Norway, but we're still a very small country. And exporting to like the main markets, let's say UK, Germany, and the US, they're a bit more open and curious compared to France. It feels like France has enough with themselves. And of course, one thing is language barrier, but I know that more and more French speak English. I'm just wondering, I was thinking, maybe that welfare system also has something to do with it, you know? It's like a dog biting its tail.
Yeah, I think that.
I think the French market, you know, French musicians are very hungry to export themselves and to be known abroad. They just might not admit it.
I think also there's a sort of closed-mindedness towards like I used to manage a Finnish band called KXP, and we worked a lot with Music Finland. And as soon as people know that they're a band from Finland, they're like, yeah, but I mean, who wants to listen to a band from Finland? And I'm like, well, you haven't even heard the band yet. And I think that there are these barriers, you know, like people say, oh yeah, but we had ABBA, so what else do we need from the Scandinavian countries? And you're like, that has nothing to do with that. But I think that there are, and it's not just that. It's, you know, we need to people to stop talking about this. You know, musique du monde, world music. It's traditional music. It comes from traditions, you know, and all of these kind of colonial ideas about classifying music, and all of these kind of country-based ideas about like people in India only make music for Bollywood. No, you know, and I think it translates in Europe as well, and people are still breaking down these preconceptions.
I think like we don't have international act don't have so much support from radio in France, and because we have quota also like 50% or I don't know 30% needs to be French, and we don't have a huge press that talking about international acts, but there is a way to develop. You have a lot of boutique festival. You have, for example, a big festival who do a lot of international act like transmusical, and you can start. Les Kessou? Guess who? Yeah. And you have some, but you have to know the market and to know where to start, because you have to start by this boutique festival or by this big festival like transmusical, and maybe after you can have a PR, maybe after you can have press, maybe at the end you can have radio, but it's a long path. But there is a way.
If there's, yeah.
I was going to say another reason that you might consider French musicians to be a bit, that you might consider them to be a bit inward-looking is that, you know, charts in France are completely dominated by domestic acts, and namely domestic rappers. And so you won't see as much Drake, Post Malone, Ed Sheeran in French charts as you will in Germany or in the UK. So there is quite a lot of money to be made in France for domestic acts, and I think more so than a lot of other European countries. So that might be kind of an answer to your question as well.
That's all the time we have. Thank you, everyone. Do you have one more question? Maybe no? Okay. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.